losing our father was a major earthquake for me. My dad was healthy
Mhm.
and just one day didn't wake up in his sleep.
Mhm.
No warning,
Yeah.
no preparation. And so I value relationships and life because of that.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome to the Buckeye Podcast. We are back with another episode. I am Renee Nicole,
I'm Lillian.
and we are going to talk about an important topic. It's not always an easy topic to discuss, but we're going to talk about grieving, all types of grieving, whether it be a loss of a loved one, loss of a job, loss of a relationship. There's so many different ways, even losing ourselves, that we deal with grieving. And so we're going to talk about that topic today. But you guys always know we like to start off with sharing our book God experience for the week. So, Lillian, what special but God experience have you encountered?
All right. So my butt God experience recently. Um, so over the last year, I have a younger brother. He's about a year younger than me, and you would think we were pretty close, but over the years we've kind of like drifted apart, and especially last year during COVID. Um, God was really dealing with me with him, and so I had to go through this time of letting him go and putting him in God's hands. And it was really like I had to consider him dead, you know, because he's my only sibling. He's all I have as family. I mean, I have my mother, but my father passed going to be 13 years now. And it's just me, my mother, and my brother. And so for my whole life, it's always just been me and my brother. And I've always like brought him along with me in jobs and things like that. Moved to Virginia and he moved here. And so during COVID, we had a little fallout. And I've always, I guess, I'll admit, I'm a little bit controlling. That's part of my DNA makeup, trying to let go. And so he wasn't doing things the way that I particularly would have wanted him to do things. And, that's been a problem. And so I went to God, like, what's the deal? Like, I can't deal with this kid anymore. Just, he's getting me so frustrated. I mean, a few years ago, we had an altercation, physical altercation. I mean, it just really got really bad. And so God said, you need to consider him dead. And I'm,
Wow.
no way. Like, are you kidding me? He's my only sibling. Like, what am I gonna do? How can I be like considering him dead? And I'm not a mean spirited person at all. Like, I love everyone and I always go out of my way for everyone. And so it was like I have to turn my back on my brother. And that was really, really hard for me. Um, and so I did it. I was like little by little doing it, and then I finally did it. And now a year later, um, I'm happy to say, but God, my brother and I are back together in a good relationship, and we got to celebrate his birthday this year, which last year we didn't. It was the first time we never celebrated his birthday together. Me, my mother, or him together. We didn't do it last year.
Wow.
We weren't talking. And it was also hard for my mom because she had to, I won't say she had to choose because I never made her choose, but my mom didn't also like how my brother was treating me because my mom knows, like, my heart, that I'm not a bad sister and I'm not a bad person. And how my brother was treating me was completely wrong in my mom's eyes. And then the way that she raised us, like she's like, who is he? I don't recognize, this is not my son. you
Mm.
know so the buck guide is that a year passed, and for his birthday this year we all went to lunch together. We went and got ice cream, and he's coming over like every day now, which is crazy because he wasn't doing that before. And he's calling me, which he wasn't doing that before. He would actually be ducking my calls. And now he's like calling me, do you want something to eat? Or you want to go grab a bite or something? And I'm like, oh, who is this kid?
Right.
As painful as it was very painful to think of my living sibling as dead. Um, I had to do it, but God gets the glory in the end because he had to deal with my brother on some things. And me as well. The controlling part, I had to let go and let God. And I really learned like I can't control everything for everyone. I can't even really control for me for that much.
Yeah.
And I have to worry about my own. So um, I'm glad to say that we are in good, good, good place right now, and I'm grateful.
That's beautiful. It really is. I think that with the pandemic, for me especially, it definitely heightened my value sense when it comes to family, because as you grow older, it's easy to kind of get focused on your own thing. And man, but to have your sibling here and like not be able to have a relationship with them can be really challenging, can be really hard. So I think it's important that you do let go sometimes and let that person do the growing they need to, and then be able to come back new and recharge. So that's beautiful to me. That's so beautiful.
Thank you. It was a little like because of COVID hard because people were dying. You just didn't know. And I will say that losing our father was a major earthquake for me. My dad was healthy
Mm-hmm.
and just one day didn't wake up in his sleep.
Mm-hmm.
No warning,
Yeah.
no preparation. And so I value relationships and life because of that.
Mm-hmm.
I always want to celebrate people and show them how much I care and how much they mean to me because my dad died so suddenly and no one is promised tomorrow. And so for my brother with the situation, it was just really, really hard because he also went through that experience.
Right.
So it was like, how come he doesn't value it as much as I do? But that's me wanting to control and have what we talked about expectation.
Expectations. I was gonna say that. That's where I'm at in the book now too. It's like we are like, why don't you think the way that I think? Why don't you process things the way that I do? And that causes us to have resentment towards people with these unspoken or unattainable expectations, because that person doesn't process things the way that you do, and they are not you, and every individual is unique. And so we have to realize that everyone does not go around thinking the way that we do, unfortunately. As much as we think that would be the right way, or we think that what we're thinking is just right, it's not that person's way of thinking. So
No,
it's
it's not.
hard. And I think with family, it's hard for people to let those relationships go, but they can be some of the most straining relationships,
Yeah,
because we love so hard. We love our family so much, right? And we want the best for them, and we want to show them like, look, this is what is the best for you. And when they don't see it, it hurts us. But we have to let go of the reins and let them be who they are meant to be, and just let them be who they are in your relationship even. And I think sometimes that takes separation to be able to do, because that person learns to value things that they may not have before, and vice versa. So that's such an encouragement for a lot of people, I'm sure, what you just shared.
yeah.
Yeah.
And it's like you said, like with your family, it's especially when it's your only sibling,
Mm-hmm.
and it's just there's an identity part of that,
Mm-hmm.
that like it's just me and my brother and my mom right now, but eventually it might just be me and my brother,
Mm-hmm.
me by myself.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it's those kinds of things that are a little like they're hard to accept.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like you said, I would always say, like, where did he grow up? Like, who raised him?
Mm-hmm.
House
Yeah.
did he live in? But we don't know what perception of realities he took and how, through his lens of looking at life, life was reflected.
Exactly. Or his experiences outside of your household, you
And his
know?
experiences, like with my parents, his relationships are very different. That was one thing I tried to always say to my mother, like, I have this beef with him, not you. He's your son.
Mm-hmm.
I
Mm-hmm.
don't want you to take sides.
Right.
I want you to pit you against, I don't want that. So you go call your son if he calls, and that would be my one thing with him. You and I can have beef. You and I can look the other way when the other one's coming. I told him, but I will not stand for you to disrespect your mother. That is your mother. You only have one, and she loves you dearly. So you want to visit? I'll leave. You want to call? I won't answer the phone. I'll pass it to mommy. But don't do that to her. You
Yeah.
know, it it was hard, but anyway, what was your
My Buckeye experience deals with family and the subject matter as well. And I think all of this stuff ties in together, but just like you said, being prepared for losing someone that you love, or just the life that you're accustomed to can be, the grievance process can be hard, and it can be just challenging. You never know what to expect, and you never know what to expect from yourself. And um, as I've shared on here before, my uncle passing a year ago, I didn't know how I was going to handle it. My uncle Joe, I was probably the closest to, outside of my mother, is probably the second closest person I was to. Even at times, we were closer than him, me and my mom at times. Like, he's just always been a big part of my life. Like my big brother, like he's the one I would call on when I, was doing stuff I shouldn't be doing. He was the one that I would confide in. So when he started to get sick, I never really even fathomed that it could lead to him not being here. I'm like, he's gonna push through. He dealt with different illnesses for a long time, and when he went to the hospital during COVID, it was especially hard because no one could be there. I've seen the things that go on in the hospitals, and I don't necessarily trust everyone that has to tend to my uncle. So how can I know he's getting the best care, right? Um, and so it was especially hard, for me, for my mom, who that's her little brother, and my grandmother, who that's her son. And so now, it being a year since he's passed, um, I'm especially grateful for the lessons that it's taught me. Although I would give anything, for him to be back. My but God experience is that it didn't break me in the way that I thought it would. Like, I really, when it was going on, and when we were getting these bad um, reports from the doctors, I just would lose it. Like, I'm going to lose my mind. This isn't, who am I going to call on when I need this, that, and so forth. But now, seeing the strength that God provided me to be able to continue, and the strength he's given my grandmother and my family, I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for the memories. So that's my but God experience, is that, wow, it didn't break me, but God, it didn't do anything but make me value family more, make me be more conscious of where my time is spent, and just being around, because there were years I didn't come home. There were times where I would go a whole year and not see my family, and so now being here with them, it's like, wow, I'm kind of regaining some of that time. I wish it didn't take that for it to happen, but I believe Alicia Keys says in her book that death is sometimes used to help us live more on purpose. It helps us to, like, it awakens us that we're wasting sometimes the gifts and the talents and the purpose that lies within us. So I think this experience really has caused me to realize that, like, I don't want to live another day just living, without actually living for purpose. So that's why I've kind of redirected the things that I do, the things that I work on, making, time spent with family a priority, not saying, oh, I got to do this. No, I'm going to stop and I'm going to be present. So I think that's one of the gifts, if you can even say that, of losing a loved one, is that it kind of makes you refocus and get calibrate it with what God wants you to do.
Yeah, for sure gives you a new perspective,
Mm-hmm.
and whole, like you said, like a new outlook on life. Um, I feel the same way um, with my father's death. I feel the same way. June is normally a very hard month for me because it's Father's Day, and then my father passed on the 29th, which is the day before my mother's birthday, which is the 30th. And so it's really like emotional.
Mm-hmm.
And so from my father's death, I have gained, like you said, a new perspective. I have gained an amazing relationship with my mother that if my father was alive, I wouldn't know her the way I know her today.
Mm-hmm.
My dad was in that position.
Mm-hmm.
You know, he has allowed me to now have this relationship with her, and even with my son, to just have a different, like, make sure I'm present, make sure I'm sensitive, and just listening better. And like, even when you're like with your family, for me now, it's really important for me to try to get back to family. I live in Virginia. I have no family here except my mother and my brother. um, all of my family is either New York, Florida, Puerto Rico. Well, I'm not going to Puerto Rico. I'm not moving back to New York. Florida's looking like Sunshine State I can go to.
Mm-hmm.
And so it's really hard around the holidays,
Mm-hmm.
not having family to go and hang out with or whatever. It's like, it's just us three. Oh, we're going to make a big dinner for just us three. Like, this doesn't make any sense. But it is, it's something where when you lose someone like that in that way, I don't know if you ever could fully prepare for it, to be honest. To have Uncle Joe passed away that he did, at a young age, like he was, for the things that he had to go through in his life. um I don't know if you could ever have prepared for that.
Yeah.
My father, I don't know if I would have been able to prepare for my father, to pass. Sometimes it may sound morbid. I think the same thing for my mom. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Like, I say there's going to need to be another casket alongside of her because I'm going in with her.
Yeah.
Because that's what you think.
Mm-hmm.
Close to that person.
And that's
But
what I want to talk about first. We're talking about the subject of grieving. Um, I think the first step is acknowledging your grieving process, acknowledging that you are grieving and not just saying, I have to be strong. I can't cry. I can't feel sad,
right.
because I think that a lot of people, um, they look at that as strength. Oh, you're not crying, you're sucking it up and you're dealing with it. And no, strength means I might be tearless today, but I might break down tomorrow. And that's okay. So I think acknowledging that you are grieving, acknowledging that there is no time limit to grieving.
Please
Um,
acknowledge.
yeah, and taking the time to actually go through the process. So what would you say your grieving process look like?
So I'm not one to be emotional. I think we have established that and kind of know that a little bit. So for me, might sound mean to someone. When my father passed, he passed in his sleep at middle of the night, 2 in the morning or something like that. We didn't find out till like 5 in the morning when my mother went to wake up. Um, so I was with my mom from 5 in the morning till the end of the night, kind of. And I went home. It was like 2 in the morning the next day, and I was walking our dog at the time, and I just remember saying to God, "Thank you,
Mm,
thank you."
mm,
I said, "I don't know if this is right to be feeling this way, God."
mm,
I'm relieved. I'm relieved because my father smoked 5 packs of cigarettes a day. He drank He was an alcoholic. He drank once a day, once on the weekends, but he drank a lot. He drank a lot in that one day that he did drink. Um, and so he was not happy. He was filled with a lot of anxiety. He was living in his apartment with my mother, and he wouldn't like travel. He wouldn't do anything. Just lived in this apartment, and he was like a prisoner. And it broke my heart, you
Yeah.
know. And so I felt like God saved me from having to make a decision of like, what if he would have gotten cancer, and it would have had to been like this long, drawn out kind of thing, you know. I always remember the episode in Sopranos, I think it was Sopranos, where somebody got cancer. I think it was, yeah, one of them got cancer, and it was this long, drawn out process. And I just remember saying, like, wow, that's got to be hard,
Yeah.
you know, to make that decision. And I remember when my grandfather went for a gallbladder removal, but he wound up catching an infection, and he died. But he was like in a coma for like 3 weeks or something. um, my dad had to make a decision. He got the call from the hospital, and they were saying, "You are the eldest, child. You make the decision. He's been in this coma for 3 months, 3 weeks now. Like, what do we do?
Yeah.
Take him off or keep him on?" And my father was so filled with so much emotion of like, "Oh God, I don't know what to do. I don't want to do this." And thankfully, my grandfather passed on his own within that time frame that my father was supposed to call the hospital back and
Oh,
say,
wow.
take him off. He was taking a vote with his siblings, and in that time, my grandfather passed. So I just say, like, for me, it was like I wouldn't want to make that decision. So when it comes to my grieving process, when my father died, I was a bit relieved. And then we had the services, and one thing I probably give agreement to with the Jewish people is getting the dead buried like ASAP,
Mm-hmm.
because you go through the emotions of grief and the shock that day, and then as the days go on you're still dealing with them, but it kind of gets a little bit easier to manage, and then you got to go to the funeral, and then like all over again it all just comes thrown back up in your face. And so for me, my dad passed on a Sunday. We didn't have his services until July 5th. He passed on June 29th, July 5th. And it
Mm-hmm.
was like, geez, now I got to feel all of this.
Yeah.
I wasn't letting myself feel anything, because that's me. That's my makeup. And I'm not saying that's good. I'm working on that. Renee knows I am working on breaking down those walls that I built as a child.
Mm-hmm.
I was in this process of not feeling. I didn't feel anything. When he passed that Sunday, my childhood best friend came down. She was crying hysterical
Mm-hmm.
in the bed, and she was like laying almost like next to my father because he died in the bed in his sleep. She was like caressing his head, like, and I refused to go in the room.
Mm.
My process is very, different. And then after we did the services, July 5th, July 6th, I broke.
Yeah.
I literally just crumbled because I didn't realize I was holding it in. It wasn't that I was saying I need to be strong.
Right.
It just, part of how I was raised was that, be strong. It was already programmed in me. But every month after that, and even still today, I grieve my father once a month.
Mm-hmm.
The month of June, like I said, it's very sensitive. It's hard for me sometimes. I don't want to be around Father's Day. I don't want to, for years I tried to like not listen to anything or be around anyone for Father's Day.
Mm-hmm.
Until last year, that I was like, you know what? No, like, I celebrate my dad. I celebrate him.
Yeah.
So once a month, because of my hormones, I'm not in control. So they take over. So I have a little mini funeral for my dad. And
Mm-hmm.
I talk about him. I learned that part of my process is I still talk about my dad like if he was here.
Right.
Like his memory is still very much alive in me. I am my father's daughter, period.
Mm-hmm.
I want him to be proud of me. So sometimes I do chat with him sometimes, or I go through memories or whatever. You have to find what works. I think what you said earlier is the time frame. People have this, I don't know why. They think you have a time frame,
Right.
you know? When my father passed, I was given a bereavement time. And I took some time off of work. I actually took longer. I took 3 weeks. And then I came back. And I remember my supervisor, my boss at the time, I was doing something, Yankees tickets. My dad was a big baseball nut job, like sports was his thing. And I was going through the Yankee tickets, and that was what he and I were supposed to do on June 29th when he died. But he passed. So it got very emotional and I started crying. So in comes my boss and he's like, "Why are you crying?" Like it's been now by this time, it's been over a month, 6 weeks maybe. He's like,
So why are you crying?
"Why are you crying?"
Wow.
And I'm like, I couldn't muster up the words because I was just so distraught. I went to the bathroom, I cleaned my face, and I went right into his office and I said, "You know what? You don't get to tell me why I cry and grieve and when I grieve for my father. You don't get to tell someone how and when they get to grieve for their loved one. You respect and you walk away if you can't say anything nice." And he was like, and I went to my office and one of my colleagues came and calmed me down, whatever. And then like 20 minutes later, he came in my room and he closed the door and he apologized.
Mm-hmm.
He said, "You're absolutely right. I don't get to tell you."
Like,
And then,
who in their right mind would do that?
right,
Especially to an employee.
but some
Like,
people are like that. They're so stoic. They're so cold. You know,
wow.
maybe they've never lost someone close to them. This
Mm-hmm.
is why for me, when it came down to like saying my brother's dead, like I'm never gonna talk to him again, was like, I wish I could talk to my father right now.
Mm-hmm.
Wish I would give back everything that I have.
Mm-hmm.
Get 5 minutes. If I could get 5 minutes with my father, I would give everything back. So the time thing, people have to let that go.
They
We
have
have
to let that go.
people's process, and it is a process. It doesn't get easier. Losing a parent, that's fine. Like death is final, and parent, the significance of they gave us life. It's like it's hard.
It's hard. And I think it's okay too. Yeah, I like that you brought up the fact of you grieving differently from your friend. I think that's, we have to accept that as well. Because
Right.
sometimes we can beat ourselves up for not responding the way you would think you would. Like I think it was about a month before that the doctor started to call in, and then he recovered, and then again, like the day of, they called my grandmother back to the hospital. And in that period, like I said, I thought I was going to lose it. And when I got the news, I didn't cry. I didn't respond the way that I would have thought I would. The day of his homegoing service, I was together. Like I was, handling things and taking care of stuff. So, some people might happen to them and they'd be like, "What's wrong with me? Like, why am I not sad? Why am I not crying? Why am I not breaking down right now?" But like you said, it wasn't until I was home alone that I broke down and realized, okay, this is reality. So I think that once a lot of people have that response. I've noticed too. Like I have a friend who lost her mother, and I remember she was smiling and laughing with people at the funeral, and I just couldn't understand it. And then she told me, I had my moments, but you're just you're outside of yourself, I believe, in the moment where you're just like, I'm not even really registering everything that's going on right now. It's not until you have a moment to like stop and breathe and process everything. And that is okay. Don't beat yourself up for your response, because it's bigger than you. It's an internal thing that you don't even know or understand. And if you are the one who breaks down, and that's okay too. You have to be okay with your response. And there are so many different types of grieving. I want to talk a little bit about grieving a relationship. That's
Yeah.
another process. I know some of us have taken years to overcome or get over a breakup or a heartbreak. And that's another thing too, that I feel like with any type of loss, you really have to be intentional about understanding your emotions and understanding what you're feeling, and taking the time to process what happened, so that you can actually get to a place where you can go on and move on. But you do have to go through the grieving process. And that's one of the things that everybody processes it differently. But sometimes I feel like we rush to move into a new relationship hoping that will be the fix. And I
Well,
think that we have to do the work, the inner work, to really heal.
I think also though, here's the thing though with grieving. So a few things. So yes, we have to understand how we grieve. I think for me, I think when I know how I handle stress, and I handle stress the same exact way. No one would recognize that I am stressed. Sometimes it shocks me that I'm like, oh my gosh,
Mm-hmm.
I'm stressed. This is what this is, That's just how again, it's my makeup. It's what I learned on survival, right? So I have to survive. So my survival mode kicks in, and that's me surviving. And I get through it. And then when I have my time, it all comes down. I'm getting better at recognizing my emotions as I'm going through things, having check-ins with myself, seeing how things are feeling, because I've suppressed for so long that sometimes I don't feel anything. And I think that's normal. And I'm like, wait, that's not normal. It's not normal to not feel anything. I envy someone who can start crying just because they're touched by something. It's only Dumbo and Old Yeller. Like those are the only things, and Bambi. Like those kind
Let
of.
me tell you, the grass is not greener on the other side, because I hate it. I can watch a Hallmark commercial and just be waterworks over just the smallest thing, and I hate it. It's not a fun place to be.
He hates it. He actually wants to stop doing that. But exactly, the grass isn't greener. Curly hair, straight hair. You know what I'm saying? So, but the other thing is in grieving. I think we only think of grieving as death.
Mm-hmm.
And like you said, it's relationships, but it's not just husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend. It's girlfriend, girlfriend, sister, sister, brother,
Brother, sister, yeah.
and sister. It's work relationships. It's all of these things, but we only want to recognize the grieving process primarily in death,
Yeah.
not in relationships. And we're doing ourselves a disservice by not doing in every area of our life. I shared with you earlier about I'm going through a whole transformation. So this is a new identity I'm taking on. So I'm having my own personal grieving moments where I'm like, who who is this? Like, I don't I gotta say goodbye to this person,
Mm.
this way of being. And I have to welcome this new part of who I am, you know? And it's not easy. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm still trying to, like I said, the emotion part of it is probably the more important thing in the grieving thing. Emotions, what do they say? Emotions and feelings are not facts,
Mm.
right? But I always kind of like go back and forth, but like feelings are valid,
I feel like they're facts for you.
right? So they're valid
They're
because,
valid for you. They're factual for you.
but they say that because like at any moment, your feelings can change. If you're feeling sad, well, then you think of something that you and Uncle Joe did together, and that makes you feel good and you feel happy for a minute. So you don't always stay within that feeling. So it's not that it's like, I don't know. I kind of go back and forth because I've heard a lot of people say, well, feelings are not facts. And I'm like, well, my feelings are valid though. They're
Yeah.
my feelings. If I feel this way, they're my
Yeah.
feelings.
I'm not gonna lie though, there's moments where I find myself thinking on a thought or a memory, and it's like, oh no, waterworks about to come. Let me think about something else. Like I gotta be honest. Like there's moments where I'm like, I can't do this today. I gotta think about something else. I gotta play some music or because I just don't want to go there.
And that's not good either, because
Yeah.
that's when we want to be controlling of, like he said, my former employer, when I get to cry, when I get to feel these.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember in the beginning of me losing my father, it was literally in the beginning every month, it was hitting. It was hitting like clockwork.
Yeah.
And I remember saying, I don't have time for this right now. I have got to go to work. My nose is swollen, my eyes are bloodshot red. Like, I can't sit here and cry over this.
Right.
And, but we do have to give ourselves the space, because if we don't, the work to do it is harder down the line. Because what we start to do is like, we make that kink in the garden hose, we stop and then the water doesn't flow. And then when we really need it, like, why nothing's happening?
Yeah.
We've suppressed it for so long.
I think it's also very important to have a support system.
Yeah.
And, even if it's just one or two people that you can talk to, I know it can be hard. I know with me, like for me, I feel like it's my mom and my grandma because we're the ones that we, like kind of share the same type of feelings about everything.
Yeah.
But it seems like when one of us, which can be a good thing too, but when one of us is up, the other one might be down.
Yeah.
And so, like, I remember me and my grandma were sitting and we were talking about how my uncle taught me how to drive. And she was just talking about the experience. And just out of nowhere, I lost it. Like, I had to run upstairs, like, and I felt bad because I didn't want her to feel bad that she had brought it up, you know. But and she, didn't intend for it to go there. But I think having a tribe, having people that you can confide in, having
Mm-hmm.
people who like, oh, remember this, to go down memory lane with sometimes, um, pictures and like looking over pictures and just
Mm-hmm.
things like that can help just refill that void of them not being there. The memories definitely do fill the void of them not being there. And I know for me, because my uncle was the one that I called whenever I cooked, because he was the chef of our family. So now I cook a lot more. I feel like because he's not here, I just feel like responsible to cook a lot more. And so sometimes I find myself talking to him like, what am I supposed to put in here? Like, should I add more of this and that? And I just kind of feel like I feel him answering me. So I think, it might feel crazy to you, but whatever works for you um,
Yeah.
is cool. And being able to have a friend or a therapist or someone that you can confide in is important, even if it is like a heartbreak. I think that sometimes I feel like when I break up with somebody, everybody all of a sudden wants to say they didn't like that person. I'm like, well, where was this like when I was so in love?
You were telling me this earlier. Why would you let me go down this road with
Right.
this person?
Right. So I think that if you have some trusted people that like, look, I just want what's best for you. And right now, clearly that person isn't, but this is how we're going to get through this thing. I don't think it has to be bashing that person in order to feel better. Cause I feel like my girlfriends sometimes like just want to bash them. Like that's going to make me feel better. And it don't make me feel no better. Like I'm still hurt. But just being able to like say like, let's do this to get your mind off of it right now, or let's do this to feel good about yourself again, let's get dressed up and like go out to eat, or I think that those type of things, we have to find things, hobbies. I think hobbies are really important with coping with a loss, so that you're not just hard sitting around thinking about it and feeling like there's no. I know there was one breakup in particular that I had that I felt like there's no getting over this. Like there's no, like the pain is gonna forever go on. And I think that finding hobbies and finding purpose in life helps you realize, no, I'm gonna be all right. I'm gonna get through this. But it's hard. In the midst of it, you don't feel that way. You don't feel
Oh,
that way. And especially now with the way dating is now, it's like ain't nobody out here. So
there isn't. No, there isn't. It's actually slim pickings again. But I think like even with dating though, there's two grievings that happen in dating. There's the relationship you grieve, that because you identified with that relationship.
mhm.
And then there's the identity. You know, like you lose the person, you like the person, whatever, then you lose your identity. You kind of lost your identity. It's something I always tell my girlfriends. Like now, instead of being so sad about this person, take the time to like look at you.
Mm,
Go back and find you. Because for some time, you kind of lost yourself in the relationship.
yeah.
You know, because it wasn't a healthy, especially when it's not a very healthy relationship and it's codependent and people are manipulative, whatever, you're not really speaking truth to your, you know, yourself or whatever. And so it's like you said, pick a hobby, find something. What did you like to do? And let that, for me, like with even with my dad, it's like you said with Uncle Joe, cooking. Cooking was something me and my father did. We watch Emerald on Sundays. We would watch PBS and we would watch Food Network and just come up with all kinds of things and recipes and what we were going to cook. And so sometimes I sit down and I make a meal and I'm like, oh, if my dad was alive, oh my God, he would just love this meal, you know, like he would just love it, right, Dad? You would just love this meal, you know. Recently, I had a conversation with my mom, who is ironclad, and I asked her. I think we were talking, and I never really asked my mom about how she feels about not having my father around. I just, I don't know. I just don't really ask that question, and she never shows any emotions of like she cried when he died, you know, and she walked with when he what is it called, the coroner came to take him. She went with the body all the way down to the street and put him in the car and everything. She wouldn't leave his side. um and then after that, like after the funeral, she did cry, but after that, I've not ever seen her cry at all, you know. Whereas me, it's like I'm once a month crying here, like a an you know, fool, whatever. But like just the other day, I was just asking my mom, like how do you feel, like, you know, like you're not having your husband here or whatever. And she said, she made a statement of like, if I could, if I could get have him back, I would welcome that. You know, like I do miss him. She's like, I do miss him, and I do think of him like living here in Virginia, how he would love it being out here. And, you know, when we go to different places, like eating stuff, like how he would love to experience that. And I'm like, oh, I was like really shocked because she never talks about it. But whereas like my dad's family, like his sister and his younger brother, we talk about my dad a lot. Like you said, we keep the memory alive and tell stories. And it's funny some of the things that you learn. And so when I had this conversation with my mom, she was starting to tell me stories that I had never heard before. And also from her perspective of an experience that we all had together, but never heard her side of it. And
Mhm.
so it was just really, really cool to hear her side.
Yeah. That's one of the things I'm grateful for too, because I'm spending a lot of time with my grandmother now. And typically, my uncle was the one. He's one of the youngest in the family, but he knew everything. Like he had a lot of responsibility from a young age, and so he knew like everything about his aunts and his uncles, his grandparents. Like he was like that person that really valued family and knew everything about everyone. So he usually was the one telling me stories, but now my grandma's starting to. So now I'm hearing stories that I've never heard before, you know, stuff before he was even here. So it's really cool to kind of be able to share that experience with her as well. So I think that it's important. And now I ask more questions. I used to be afraid because I don't know, you just don't know how people feel about certain things, but it's been fun to be able to ask her questions and hear about her life and hear about my great grandparents and things like that. So
That's a gift, Renee.
yeah.
I wish I would have had that with my grandparents. I wish I would have known to
Hmm.
value that.
Hmm.
My grandmother, she got dementia maybe like 60 something. So by the time I had Curtis, she was already with the dementia. So like in my 20s, like I didn't have much of a relationship with her. And it's sad because I'm named after her.
Mm.
Um, I just think like, hmm, I wish I would have known more. And the other day I was actually thinking, I don't really miss, and this may sound weird, miss my grandparents or my grandfather as much as I miss my father.
That makes sense.
That's because of the relationship. I had my grandparents for a time period when I was most younger.
Yeah.
You know, my grandfather, he passed when Curtis was 4. So, you know, and a little bit, but not much of a understanding of hymns like I did, or like my mom. Like I have a great understanding of my mom, and
Yeah.
she puts me in on things. But it's that one thing that I because I didn't have it, I try to push my son
Mm-hmm.
that to spend time with my mother and ask her about her life growing up in Puerto Rico. You know, I just realized that she grew up in a shack. She just told me this the other day, and I was like,
Mm-hmm.
I think it's at a house. And she was like, it was literally like a shack. It
Mm-hmm.
was literally like 2 rooms, no bathroom, because the bathroom was outside and the kitchen was outside.
Mm-hmm.
And we would hang hammocks from one side of the room to the other side, and people would sleep on the floor. I said, well, did you have a mattress? And she said, no. We just take the bamboo and we would fix it, make it thick
Wow.
like a blanket, and we would lay on top of that and use potato sacks. I'm like, that's itchy. She said, that was my blanket.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Hearing once you hear the stories, like, wow, how can I ever complain? Because the way that they used to live is just totally different. Like my grandmother and her siblings, they work. They know real work, you know. The things
Yeah,
that they had to do is, man, the conveniences that we have now is just we really take it for granted.
yeah, complaining about emptying a dishwasher.
A
A
dishwasher, right. When
dishwasher.
they had an outhouse too. She was like, we didn't have a bathroom in the house. Like they didn't go outside. So,
Like my mom was saying, like you have to go to the poop, you had to shovel, you go dig yourself a hole back there, and there wasn't any real toilet paper either.
mm,
You had to know what leaves were safe to use to go to.
wow.
And I'm like, the horror.
The horror. We're so spoiled.
So I try to tell this to my son, like your grandmother and his other grandmother migrated, I think from Yugoslavia to Italy. Like literally had to crawl under like barbed wire under the border to get through and like became a refugee. It was like it's like crazy. But it's these stories that I want him to know so that he knows the privilege of how far his family has come. You know, like I tell him like your dad was dirt poor. Like he didn't have shoes.
Mm-hmm.
He was like 5, 6 years old. You have a whole closet full.
Right, right.
You know, when I was growing up, we got shoes every September, two
Mm,
pairs, a nice dress pair and a pair of sneakers.
right.
It lasts us the whole
Oh,
year,
yeah.
the whole year.
Mm-hmm.
These kids, you know, it is such a, and I think it's enriching for them to speak to their grandparents. Like, you know, you're learning about your heritage and your culture,
Mm-hmm.
and having that real appreciation for how hard life really was
Mm-hmm.
during the time when they were our age,
Mm-hmm.
things that they did, and maybe understanding why, like you and I, we share about your grandma and my mom, like being so stoic, like so cut off from emotion, because that's the way they were raised, and they didn't have time to sit down and let me process how I'm feeling. You know,
Right.
my mom, she makes fun of it, like that's like foreign to her.
Yeah.
And I'm like, but that's the way it is right now. She's like, that doesn't make sense. You just do what you got to do, and
Yeah. And there's certain parts of it that I do appreciate and like I want to pull from, but I am grateful to kind of be able to feel and show what I'm feeling too. There's pros and cons to both, but I think that I think with loss, there's just so many feelings that we can't always identify or that we can't always, you know, put identify what it is, especially when it can be like a transition. I feel like transition can sometimes feel like a loss. You know, I think there were moments when I moved back home that I felt low key depressed, and I was like, "What is this?" You know, and I'm in a transition. It's a different lifestyle that I'm used to living. Um, I think people go through that same feeling with the transition of losing a job or quitting a job even to become a self employer or to become a entrepreneur. These are things that are very, very similar to a loss because you are, like you said, almost feeling like you've lost yourself. We
Mhm.
can a lot of the time, especially in today's day and age, identify ourselves or our identity. We make that equivalent to what we do for a living,
How
you
much?
know? And so when we're not doing what we're used to, or we're not making the money that we're used to, we can feel like we've lost ourselves, we've lost this thing, we've lost access. And that can be a very depressing place for a lot of people. And I
Absolutely.
think that's another thing that you really have to be aware of and be. And in the moment, a lot of the time you don't realize it. And then once you do realize it, you're like, okay, I'm going through a transition.
Right.
This is what I'm feeling, and these are the steps that I'm going to take to overcome so that you don't stay in that place of depression. So I think that for whatever it may be that you're experiencing, I think that the first step is identifying this is what I'm feeling. And every sense of grieving, every type of grieving, I think that's the first step. Once you identify that, then finding the things that help motivate you. Because I think a lot of the time, once we're in that place where we're feeling depressed, we can fall into this sunken place where we're not motivated. And that leads to, you know, a lack of productivity, and a lack of productivity leads to more depression or leads to more anxiety or more stress. And once we find the things that motivate us, whether it be like for me, it's working out, like that gives me the adrenaline rush I need to go do what I need to that day. It could be, you know, spending some time on the phone with a friend sometimes can be your motivator. Just talking, because sometimes loneliness can be the biggest attack against you as well. So just having a friend or someone to speak to, can be laughing, you know, watching a comedy, whatever it may be, being outside, being outdoors, going for a walk, going for a hike, um, finding some type of activity, because I think it's that idleness that often leads to us feeling those symptoms, those internal symptoms that can lead to depression or anxiety or all the different feelings that we can feel or different experiences that we may have. But yeah, I think that we have to be honest with ourselves. We have to be honest with ourselves. You've made a leap, or you've maybe been forced to take a leap, but here you are. How are we going to deal with it?
Yeah, that is important. Like I remember now looking back when my son graduated high school, I thought my life was going to be over. I thought my purpose was done. I thought I'm dying. I'm dead. Like what so it's like you said, like we sometimes identify with a lot of what we do for work. But
Mm-hmm.
as for me, it was my role as a mother.
Whoa, as a mother, yeah, that's
You
good.
know, someone that's been married for so long and now they're getting divorced.
Mm-hmm.
Their spouse, you know, or a child, God forbid, passes, you know. It's this, who am I? You know, uh it was really it's really the thing, I think the catalyst, if that's the word to say, that start the spark for me that started my transition.
Mm-hmm.
It's the thing that sparked me to start looking within and saying, who am I? What do I want to do with my life? Who do I want to be? You know, and it really got me thinking. And I went through ups and downs, anxieties and depressions and things like that. But it is like you said, like becoming aware of it. And isolation does hurt, but sometimes isolation does help, depending on how you use that isolation.
Mm-hmm.
For me, I used the isolation to spend time with God, to be really deep in prayer and just figuring out stuff because I didn't feel like I had support. And having support is major. I didn't feel I had people that understood
Yeah.
what I was going through, people that could relate or even try to even empathize for that matter of what I was going through,
Yeah.
you know? And so I reverted inside and I isolated to an extent, or I put on a mask and covered myself and made it seem like everything was good when it really wasn't, you know? And that's another thing too in the grieving process. It's owning whatever is your process. Owning the truth is someone just passed, whether it's a relationship or an actual physical person that was in your life, a loved one. Honor that. Give that the space, take the breath, and release that because we want to get so tense and not pay attention and ignore it. And we're dishonoring that person's memory and then ourselves at the same time. One thing my mom said is that she thinks sometimes my dad is on vacation, that he's going to come in the door any day now.
Mm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Because when he passed, I thought the same thing. Because I moved within 2 months of my father passing, 3 months. I relocated to Virginia. So in
Mm.
my brain, out of sight, out of mind.
Right. He's still there. Yeah.
And
Mm.
I still have these reoccurring dreams where he's sitting in my old apartment building,
Yeah.
you know, or, you know, someone will tell me, oh, I saw your dad, you know, in the dream.
Yeah.
But it's just, anyway, just
No, I
owning
have that dream all the time too, and it feels so real. So I can identify. Yeah.
so real. And it's, I don't know what it is, but that makes it easier in
Mm-hmm. It
the
does.
grieving process.
Oh,
When every day in
yeah.
your face like that, you know, it makes it easier to like, okay, I can get by.
Yeah, that's good. I think mm, God speaks to you in every area of your life in a similar way, for me at least, because he talks to me a lot in dreams.
Mm,
And so, I dream a lot about my uncle, and I know not everyone else in my family does. And I just like, you have to understand that's not, has God spoken to you like that before? That's how he's always spoken to me. So he might show up for you in a different way. One night I had a dream. Um, I was talking to my brother and I hugged my brother and it turned into my uncle. And it felt like I was hugging my uncle. So the next day I went and hugged my brother just so I could feel like that hug again. But I feel like that's the type of things God does. He hugs you in your sleep, or he'll hug you through a TV show or through a friend calling you. My grandmother this morning, she said she was on a prayer call and, she already felt like today might be rough for her. And she was on a prayer call with the church we used to be with in Atlanta from like, I don't know how many, five, for her, probably like 5 so years ago that she moved, maybe more than that, 7 years. And just randomly, the woman my grandmother used to usher with, like, let's pray for Sister Luella in Maryland. Just randomly, they didn't know that it was the day a year from her losing her son. They just randomly did that. So I think that those are things that God will do to hug you and to show you that He's mindful of you. So pay attention to those signs, because a lot of the time when people are experiencing grief, they'll feel that God's deserted them, or they'll feel like God isn't there. Even in the midst of your heartache, God is still very present, and He will remind you that He cares about those feelings, those things that you're trying to suppress, those things that you're trying to ignore, or those things that are so overwhelming that you can't ignore. He cares about those, and He's going to show you that by just sending you a little kiss, a little hug, a little warm note to show you. So pay attention to those signs and be grateful. Just be grateful for that.
yeah, that's God being in the details. That's what I call when God is in the details of things and he's just really letting you. It's funny I say like, "Oh God, you just know me so well." It's like, "Of course I do."
I created you.
Created, you know, or my unofficial, what I call unofficial prayers. The
Mm,
prayers are when I'm not sitting down saying hands in position of prayer, Father bowing my head, saying a prayer, but it's something that I think in my mind
Mm-hmm.
and don't necessarily say, God, I need your help or anything like that, but I think it or I feel it, and then God sends a message,
Yeah.
sends me something, or like my mom showed me, she still has like when my father bought her flowers when I was born,
Oh,
a little card.
that's so sweet.
Girl, congratulations, or something like that. Love, love Rob or whatever, my dad's name. And I was like, oh my gosh, like that'll just pop out, it's just some way that God lets me know that only he could have
Right.
known,
Right.
because I said it to anyone in my unofficial prayer thing.
Yeah.
So I think those are, to me, those are true, like you said, God hugs,
Mm-hmm.
that he just lets us know, like, I got you.
Yeah. I got you. And do what you, I don't know, embrace those moments and find ways to just like bring light into the situation. I feel like it's one thing to grieve and be in the mourning process, but also do what you can to bring light to whatever it is that you're going through. I was telling you about a podcast that I was listening to, and I listened to it briefly, but it's called "This Too Shall Not Suck," and the young lady Lauren Denise talked about having one of the episodes. She talked about redesigning your space. Like having an interior. She had an interior designer who was her friend who helped her, but just little things like that can help. Just help you find light in the situation and uplift your spirit. So finding those things, like I can't reiterate that enough, to
One thing,
find those things that make you keep pushing.
one thing I want to talk about that we didn't really hit on is anger. Is a part
Mm.
of grieving.
Mm-hmm.
So I shared that I was relieved when my father passed that day. Then when I had the burial, I the next day started to feel all of these emotions. One of the emotions was anger, because my dad was what I called my go-to. He was the guy I went to for anything and everything.
Mm-hmm.
I needed to make a decision at work. I needed help with my son. I needed my dad. He was my go-to. I ran everything by him. Even church things, like he wasn't a believer like that or anything like that. I mean, he believed in God, but he wasn't like me. Like,
Mm-hmm.
reading my Bible. At one point, he thought I was joining a cult because it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
that. But he was my go-to, and I remember being in my bathroom when I had this experience, this breakdown, and saying to God, like angrily, like, "Who am I going to go to now?
Mm-hmm.
Why would you take him from me, knowing that he's my go-to?
Yeah.
I need my father. I have to go through things, and he's got to help me get through them." And
Wow.
very softly and gently, God was like, "I'm your go-to."
Ooh.
And I was just like,
Mm.
really? So you're going to be, so then I get like facetious, like, so you're going to be my go-to now. So you're going to be the one. Are you going to answer the phone when I call like he did? Because my dad would always answer right away.
Mm-hmm.
You're going to have the messages for me, or the know all, or how to get me out of traffic when I, was sitting in traffic,
Mm-hmm.
and he has been.
That's it.
He has gotten me
Yeah.
through everything,
Yeah.
and sometimes I say, like, I wish you didn't take my dad, but I also do believe if my father was alive, I would not be where I am today.
Mm. Yeah.
I wouldn't know what I know. I wouldn't be who I am if he had not died,
Yeah.
because it pushed me
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to restructure myself and rebuild. And I'm still rebuilding and I'm still learning.
Mm-hmm.
Especially now that I'm going through counseling every day, every day. But I know that my dad was holding me back in some ways. And
Mm.
the reason why God took him was because he knew I wouldn't have moved from I probably wouldn't have moved from New York. Probably would still be in New York.
I'd
You know,
still be in LA. Honestly, I know I'd still be in LA trying to figure out what I'm doing with my life, seeing my family when I see them. And it honestly too made me, losing my uncle made me realize what I'm capable of. Like you said, I called him for everything too. I would be lost in California and call him. He never lived in California, but he just knows his way. Like he can fit. He was the researcher. Like he could figure anything out. When I would move, he would send me all the places. He would know the areas that I needed, the good areas and the bad parts of LA. Had never been there at the time. So yeah, it really showed me what I was capable of. Made me step up to the plate and do the things that I relied on him for myself. And yeah, I'm grateful for that. We can go into the gratitude portion here. And I think that would be my gratitude is that I'm grateful that in spite of, a heartbreak, or a tragic loss, that I've been able to take those lessons learned and take those tools that I gained from someone that I love so much and apply them to my future. So I think that that's what grieving is about. It's going to hurt. There's going to be days that you're going to break down, and that is a part of the process. But to take every memory, every lesson, and just keep that going, I think that's how you keep the person's legacy, because with my uncle, he didn't have any children of his own. I think his legacy is everything that he instilled in me, that he's instilled in his other nieces and nephews, that will continue to trickle down onto our children and so on. So that's what I'm grateful for. What about you?
so I'm grateful for similar. And so what came to me was Romans 8:28 and how the scripture says, I pulled up the amplified version. It says, and we know with great confidence that God, who is deeply concerned about us, causes all things to work together as a plan for good for those who love God, to those who are called according to his plan and purpose.
Mm.
And so I really feel like the same thing. Me losing my father worked out for my good in personally building me and pushing me and helping me to grow, but also in regards to creating this relationship with my mother and having this new value for relationships with people that I love.
Mm-hmm.
You know, God took something that probably I would have thought like you, would have crushed me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet he made it bless me.
Mm.
And every day that I get to spend with my mother is a blessing.
Yeah.
This is why I value my mother and I celebrate my mother the way that I do, because I know I wish part of me wishes I could have done that with my dad,
Mm-hmm.
that I could have celebrated him more than I did.
Yeah.
But God also, in that time that my father passed, that month of June, he allowed me to do that, not knowing it though, not knowing it would be the last.
Mm.
That
Yeah.
month of June was Father's Day, which I did celebrate with my dad,
Mm.
to take him out to eat dinner.
Oh.
Never would do. I think I told you, like he always was like, let's just go to the store and just get the stuff and we cook it ourselves.
Mm-hmm.
He always wanted to be home and cooking and stuff. And I got to do that. He got to see his grandson graduate from elementary school, which my father was big on furthering, education and graduating and all of that. So his grandson got to graduate elementary school and he was there very proud to
Yeah.
witness. And then we had like a barbecue on a beach earlier in the month, and he loved it. So I
Mm.
got to go through a lot of celebration things with him.
Yeah.
I wish I could do more, but I'm grateful for. I'm grateful for my father. Period.
Right.
Death and life and life.
Hmm. That's just another example of God being mindful of you, for you to have those last experiences to be positive ones in the way that you do.
Yeah.
That's like such great moments to remember. That's beautiful.
Yeah.
It's so beautiful. I think that this is a topic that can kind of go on and on because there's so many stages to it, and it's so everyone's process is so unique, you know. But I'm grateful that we were able to share our experiences, and I'm sure some of you can relate. And I encourage you to, you know, just chime in the comments about how you have gotten through. Sometimes, you know, some people may just be grieving, not just, but are grieving through the pandemic because it's just a weird place to be in. So I'm praying, we are praying for everyone who may be in that space, who may be grieving the loss of someone or the loss of a job or whatever it may be. We are with you. The But God podcast stands with you and are praying for you on a regular basis. So we want to keep the conversation going, definitely. But yeah, thank you for listening and being a part of this conversation. And I hope that you have a very, very blessed week. I'm Renee Nicole.
I'm Lillian.
Thank you for listening to the Book Out podcast.